Hey everybody, it's Sam. What we're going to do with this episode here is kind of give you a sneak peek into what you will get if you choose to support us on Patreon. So what follows are two special pieces of programming. One is a full-length full-length bonus episode, and the other is the 15-minute debrief from the end of the Akhenaten episode. If you listen to the King Tut episode all the way through, you'll know that we have three different levels in our Patreon structure. The first is for $1 a month. You get a shout on the show, and you get a 15, sometimes it's 10 minutes, sometimes it's 20 minutes, but a relatively 15-minute debrief at the end of the show of me and Jason just kind of talking more about how we particularly felt, or bringing up any other last-minute stories or last-minute ideas about the subject that we were chatting on. So that's at $1 a month. For $3 a month, you're going to get what immediately follows this little announcement, which is a full-length bonus episode that goes more into depth either on the historical side of things or on the crazy conspiracy side of things into the current subject that we're discussing. So for instance, what you're about to hear is our bonus episode on Akhenaten, who was of course King Tut's father. And in this episode, I think it's a real great indication of what the bonus episodes are mainly going to be. Like I said, it's a lot deeper into the history and the actual facts of the case and what happened. Because this is a really factual case, with some of the other ones where, we try to find good, real things that happened in any case, but some of them are a little more out there and they'll have a little more out there content. But the first bit of it is just the facts of Akhenaten in his life, and the second part of it is, was he an alien? And that sort of information. So that's what we're going to be covering. And like I said, that one is at the $3 tier. You get two of these episodes a month. The last tier, the $5 tier, is not included in this Patreon special. That's actually just an extended edition of the entire normal episode that comes out during the week. So for instance, with the King Tut episode, we recorded for about 2 hours and 10 minutes, and we cut it down to about an hour and a half. So there's 40 minutes there, extra stories, extra, theories, going deeper, and also just more of me and Jason doing our thing. So take a listen. If you like what you hear, you can go over to patreon.com/notalonepodcast. $1, $3, $5 a month, whatever you feel comfortable giving. We'd really appreciate the support. We don't have a whole lot of bills, but we do have the cost to host the podcast. We have, we're still borrowing Jason's microphone, so we need to buy him his own. And we would just be blown away by any amount that anyone wants to give. But you know what? If that's not up your alley, that's fine. We still appreciate you. We're still glad you're our listener, and we hope you enjoy this free Patreon special. I believe that the Akhenaten episode itself, I believe that the debrief begins at about 18 to 18 and a half minutes to the end. So if you just want to skip ahead and hear what that's like, if not, sit back and enjoy the ride. Thank you so much, and remember, we are not alone. Hello and welcome to the first ever Patreon sponsor only episode of the Not Alone podcast. I'm Sam Fredrickson, and I'm sure you're probably waiting for Jason to say I'm Jason Moitoso. However, at this point in time, looks like it's going to be just me doing the bonus episodes, which is a-okay. It gives us a chance to get closer, to get to know each other a little more. Doesn't that sound fun? All right, well, I'll go ahead and get on with it. If you're listening to this, thank you. Theoretically, the only way you could be is if you have pledged at least $3 or more a month to support me and Jason in our merry little bands of misadventures. So we just can't express that gratitude enough. And we hope to be able to do a lot more of not only the normal feed of shows, but also one of these bonus shows every 2 weeks if we can manage it. The thought process behind it, or the idea behind it, is to take this time to dive a little bit deeper into some of the things that we discuss on the show, especially if we can dive a little bit deeper in a way that's just a little bit crazier as well. Or, in this case, we're actually going to take some of the more far out there ideas associated with certain individuals in ancient Egypt and also marry them with a broader historical understanding and account of that time period. So your bonus episode should be coming out ideally every 2 weeks. They'll focus on usually the episode that comes out that same week on the normal feed, although sometimes we may go back and do older episodes, or sometimes we might do something completely different. But we're going to do our best to provide bang for your buck. We're going to do our best to make sure that $3 a month isn't wasted and that you're getting at least 2 shows a month, if not a little more, for that money. So thank you so much. And without further ado, we're going to go ahead, or I'm going to go ahead. It's so lonely in here without him. I'm going to go ahead and get us started off. So this episode is meant to pair with the Curse of Tutankhamun's Tomb episode that should be coming out. I think we're actually trying to get it out on Thursday, which would be the 27th, so that me and Jason can spend all day Friday playing Magic the Gathering. So if that's the case, cool. If we don't get it out till Friday, then it pairs with the episode released on Friday. But what we're going to be looking at here is a fella that we kind of touched on in the original episode, and that is actually Akhenaten, who is the father of Tutankhamun. He is an extremely interesting historical figure, and we'll just go ahead and get right into it. So, Akhenaten was many things. He was, of course, King Tut's father. He was the husband of the famous Queen Nefertiti. And he was also the instigator of a heresy. He was labeled a traitor and a criminal. Many texts written after his lifetime do not reference him by name, but call him instead only the enemy or that criminal. However, he wasn't always that criminal, and he wasn't always Akhenaten. When he was born to the pharaoh Amenhotep III, he was named Amenhotep IV. Amenhotep III was the 9th king of the 18th dynasty of ancient Egypt, and Amenhotep means Amun is satisfied. Amun, as we'll kind of see a little bit later on, was the chief king of the gods. Now, there's a little bit of debate as to when Amenhotep IV took the throne. Some people think it was only after his father, the third, died. Some people think they ruled as co-regents together. But in any case, what we do know is that he remained Amenhotep IV for 5 years of his reign, and then suddenly he changed his name to Akhenaten, which meant effective for Aten. Now, he ruled for 17 years, and at the end of it, he was struck from the king's list, which is a collection of the pharaohs and the dynasties of ancient Egypt. His monuments were pulled down, the city he built was destroyed, and his memory was actually condemned, which means that you weren't allowed to talk about him, you weren't allowed to think about him. He definitely never existed. But why? What could he have done that would incite such anger? And the answer is something that is such a radical departure from Egyptian tradition that in an effort to forget it even happened, we forgot that he existed for up to 2,300 years after his death, which was about the time that his tomb was uncovered. Now, we're going to go ahead and try to walk you through this. Of course, Egyptian mythology, the religion of ancient Egypt, is extremely well known, and it's also extremely complicated. So I'm going to kind of glaze over things here. I'm going to gloss over them, and I may, full disclosure, I may get some things wrong. If I do, and if you care, let me know. I always love to learn how I'm wrong. But we're going to try to cover it a little bit here. And, you know, the thing about ancient Egyptian religion is that if you ask someone to name something Egyptian, or say, hey, what makes you think of Egypt? You know, when I say Egypt, what do you think of? You're going to get some pretty predictable answers. Things like the pyramids, the pharaohs, the Great Sphinx. All of these answers, as well as pretty much the majority of anything else you're going to receive, are all linked to one thing, which is the religious belief system of ancient Egypt. Now, this wasn't a passive religious society. These people didn't wake up on Sundays, go to church for an hour, come home, take a nap, and then the rest of the week do their thing, maybe with a little Bible study here, or, you know, a little bit of praying here or there, or some good acts in the meantime. These people's religion was their entire life. Their faith influenced every part of their life. And to them, their gods were as real as anything. As you are, as I am, their gods were there. They were watching, they were listening, and none more so than the Pharaoh. The Pharaoh of ancient Egypt was a god king. He was the literal and physical embodiment of the god Horus, which a lot of people may recognize, some people may not recognize, as a man with the head of a falcon, who was the god of the sky. While the king was on earth, he ruled, while the Pharaoh was on earth, he ruled as king, and he was believed to be the literal incarnation of Horus. He would rule on earth, he would die on earth, and he would pass through to the next world, where he then became the god Osiris, the god of the afterlife, who is depicted as a very attractive, and that's not my words, that's how it should be, but he's not a bad looking guy, very attractive, but relatively normal looking human being, except that he had green, blackish skin, which was linked to, and this is the other fascinating thing, I wasn't even really going to talk about this, but might as well, it's linked to the Egyptian cyclical idea of resurrection and life after death and all of that stuff. His skin is green to represent obviously the fertility of life and you know, beautiful green branches and trees and bushes and all this. And then his skin is also mixed with a black color to indicate the fertile soil out of which plants and thereby all life seems to spring. He, unlike most gods of death and the afterlife and all that, he wasn't a dark, gloomy fella. Like, for the Egyptians, death was absolutely nothing more than a simple transition, another part of life. You know, they believed that they would die, and after they died, there'd be another life. So the Egyptians believe in a concept known as the Ka, which is the essential spark of life, or kind of what we nowadays might refer to as the soul. They have the essence of the Ka, which is basically a person's eternal essence, and then they have the idea of the Ba, which was the spiritual identity of an individual. Now, the Ka left the body naturally at death. In fact, that's all death really seemed to be, was Ka leaving the body. There was no other state or anything like that that they really associated with other than, oh, his Ka's gone. Now, Ka would leave the body at death. Ba would remain within the body. And like I said, Ba is the personality. Ba is the nature, the spiritual identity of the person. It would remain in a dead body and would have to be released through certain rites and rituals. Now, once it was released and reunited with the Ka, a person's Ka and Ba would merge into an Akh. The two elements, the immortal soul of the Ka and the individual spiritual identification merging into the Akh, created the immortality of the deceased person after death, as opposed to simply being conscious in the afterlife, as opposed to simply being aware in the afterlife. You now were you in the afterlife. You existed just how you had existed here on Earth, but you are now immortal. You could do whatever you want. In fact, by the time of the New Kingdom period, the Akh was actually understood to be able to actually come back to normal life, come back to the Earth in the form of something that we would recognize as, just a ghost. It's important to realize that at the beginning in the Old Kingdom times, only the Pharaoh was thought to have a Ba, and that essentially when an average person, when a lay person died, they would be surviving, they would exist, but it wasn't always super great. It was basically described as an existence that is the exact opposite of life, which, having never not been alive, I don't really know what to make of that. But in any case, it was not always a great thing. Now, while the idea that the Pharaoh was the only person with a Ba originated in the Old Kingdom, by the time of the New Kingdom and really starting in the Middle Kingdom, and these are of course periods in history, they're not geographical locations. It became pretty generally accepted that everybody has a Ba. Everybody can have the same kind of kick-ass afterlife as, the Pharaoh might have. And it takes away, not completely, because the Pharaoh is still identified as Osiris in the afterlife, but it used to be that the only way you had any chance of any sort of great afterlife is to have the Pharaoh's blessing, have him use that basically magic that's imbued within him to grant you the opportunity to have a Ba, and then to become a Akh, and then to feast with the gods and enjoy your time after death instead of kind of just meandering around. But, like I said, that wasn't really the case by the time of the New Kingdom. People decided, I don't know if people decided or their gods decided or their pharaoh gods decided, somebody along the way decided that all you really had to do was to not be a totally crappy person. That you have this idea of the ceremony that happens upon the death of every person, in that they meet with Osiris. They're escorted by the Egyptian god Anubis, who many of you may know as the jackal-headed god who's the protector of the dead, the keeper of the dead, basically. He escorts them to a meeting with Osiris, where Osiris weighs their heart against a feather. I know it sounds tough, but supposedly a lot of people pass this. If the heart is lighter than a feather, they're good. They get to have their great time. They're immortal now. They're whatever. If not, they were fed. Okay, so if their heart is heavier than a feather, they're fed to a type of demon. I forget the name, but it's basically a crocodile-headed lion, which would devour them, and that brings in the concept of annihilation, which is that even though there is an afterlife, you are not a part of it. You are completely and totally destroyed. You get nothing else, no resurrection, no communion between your Ka and your Ba. There's absolutely nothing except not even blackness. I mean, there's nothing. It's something that keeps me up at night just thinking about it. But that was the belief. And it, again, if you're a good person, if you're doing what you need to, ideally your heart's going to be lighter than that feather and you're going to be all right. Now, the entire pantheon of ancient Egypt was presided over by Amun, who was the king of the gods. He was the central point of worship in Egyptian society, and his priests, because their society so closely modeled their religious beliefs, his priests had all the power. It had been this way for hundreds of years prior to Akhenaten's rule, but within years, Akhenaten had ordered people to no longer worship Amun or any of the other gods. Instead, he directed them to focus their worship on the great sun disk, the solar disk, Aten, who is an invisible, uncreated god, who gives life to all, very much like your typical sun god mythology. However, the difference here is that for the first time, really, in ancient Egypt, things were moving away from their polytheistic, their entirely complex structure into a monotheistic setting, wherein there is one god, his name is Aten, and there's no one else who's going to be worshipped. This was weird. This was really weird for the people back then. I can't even imagine. I mean, on one hand, Aten had only just become really a god, more than just being the solar disk, which is its own entity, but not technically a god. Suddenly he's a god, and suddenly he's the chief god, and then right after that, he's the only god. So this, I mean, it's hard to even create a comparison, but we're going to try. It would be akin as if Pope Francis, came out, had a conference at the Vatican, all of this, and he says, basically, it's just crazy. He says, God the Father of Catholic belief, Christian belief, God the Father is a false idol. Everybody needs to stop worshiping him and instead worship Saint Peter as the one true deity. Like, it's not even a perfect representation, because obviously Saint Peter's not a god, but that's about as close as we can get to understanding just that one aspect of what was going on. The other weird thing about it is, like we just covered, the Egyptian gods, or the Egyptian pharaoh, was Horus in life and Osiris in death. So now he's done away with Horus, he's done away with Osiris, and in his own way, he's surrendered his own godhood. Now, that's not completely accurate, as we'll see here in a little bit, but it's a bold move. It's like if Kim Jong-un suddenly came out and said, hey guys, I'm just like you. I am just a normal dude. I like kicking it. I like relaxing. I like hanging out. Got a little more money and power, but nothing much. It's a completely mind-blowing concept in this area of time, this place, and these people who, for them, were used to the pharaoh being the god king. His power was divine, and it rocked more than a few boats. I mean, the beliefs itself rocked more than a few boats. But then you have the fact that he also says, hey, Amun, Osiris, Ra, Horus, you're out of here. And he orders his people, especially the priests of Aten, who, just like any other god, has had his own little cult of followers, but they weren't powerful. They had nothing even resembling power before this, but that cult and other lay people as well were forced to join in the desecration of temples, and were forced to pull down monuments of the gods, forced to sack their own cultural heritage and history, because this one man had decided that all of it, the last 2,000 years of history, was wrong. I mean, I can't imagine being in that time if my entire world changed pretty much overnight like that. But that's exactly what happened. They pulled down all the other gods. They pulled down all the other statues and idols. And again, just as like a crappy comparison of what it would be like today, it would essentially be the opposite. It would be the Pope, instead of saying there is one God and he is God, instead of that, he says not only does God, the Christian God, not exist, but Zeus, Hera, Osiris, Thor, all of them, Fenrir, they all exist, and you need to worship them. That it be on the same scale as that. And you just have to wonder how these people felt. You just have to really try to wrap your head around your entire cultural, religious context being just shattered in a moment. And then you also have the economic issues. Of course, these temples were city centers. These temples were places of business. The priests and the acolytes of the temples, the people who took care of them and followed them and all. This is all a huge source of revenue and industry, and it's how, people spent their money back then. You spend it on your food, you spend it on your family, and you spend it on your god. And it caused economic and political chaos. The last thing that he really did, the last big thing, was to move the seat of power from Thebes, which it had pretty historically been, especially during the New Kingdom period. He moved it from Thebes to a new city that he had built called Akhenaten, which was just built just to worship Aten. Now, all of these things combined into what's known as the Atenist heresy, and this is the reason that he got struck from the king's list. This is the reason that for 2,300 years we had no idea who him or his family were. We didn't even know that he had existed. Like, he was removed. It's astonishing. It's just so crazy. And maybe I'm getting a little too into it because I'm a history nerd. Maybe it's just that, I've loved ancient Egypt ever since I was a kid. I actually, for some of the research for this and for the Tutankhamun episode, I actually grabbed a book, the Encyclopedia of Ancient Egypt, that my parents had given me when I was like 12, and took a lot of that from this. But in any case, if you just want to observe and see a paradigm shifting situation in the history of the world, you're going to get nothing better than this. In not one day, okay, but within a few years, really, for the process to start and then be completed, the spiritual life, the cultural life of Egypt had changed so drastically that it would not be recognizable. You would not be able to go into Egypt and talk about Amun, talk about Osiris. If you had ever visited there before and you tried to come back and talk about these people, God forbid, because it's not only not cool, it's not only not all right, it's not legal. You could not legally worship these gods or even mention them. And so in that way, it's kind of fitting what happened to Akhenaten and the way that his name was erased. He attempted to erase the gods, and instead the gods erased him, buried him under the sand, buried his monuments, and granted they had some help from their followers, but just destroyed his entire legacy. Now, after Akhenaten died, after neglecting his kingdom, after neglecting their socio-political economic needs, eventually he had one other person before him, and I think it may have been his brother or his uncle or something, but eventually Tutankhamun takes the throne, because Tutankhamun is the son of Akhenaten. And the kid was like 9, I think, 8 or 9, when he gets to be the pharaoh. Most of what is done during his reign, while it's still attributed to him, and while I'm sure as he got older, he died when he was about 18 or 19, I'm sure as he got older, he had ideas of his own, but really he's seen as a restorationist. He pours massive amounts of money, massive amounts of manpower and labor into the restoration of these old temples, into the restoration of the old gods. He forthwith, through the advice of his Grand Vizier, A-Y, might be I, unbans the worship of Amun, unbans the worship of all the other gods, says, hey, everybody's good, everybody's okay. The cult of Amun totally skyrockets back to the top. It's interesting to note that Tutankhamun's name was originally Tutankhaten, and that indicates his father's allegiance to Aten, but once he became the ruler and all of this, he went back to he changed his name to Tutankhamun, and therefore kind of reestablished Amun as the actual deity in charge. He did a lot. He in the course of his life, we're not going to go too far into it here because we got this whole other episode that you may or may not have already listened to, so some of this might be old hat to you, but he spent his life pretty much restoring Egypt's religious systems as well as its political systems. Akhenaten had zero interest in diplomacy and in political alliances or anything like that. He pretty much just let all that fall by the wayside, so King Tut came back and fixed that as well. But once Tutankhamun died, his Grand Vizier, Ai, who was, I believe, actually his uncle, carried out that campaign of condemnation of memory on Akhenaten and his whole family, including King Tut, including Queen Nefertiti, and that's when they were officially lost for 2,400 years, until Akhenaten's tomb was actually uncovered first, then Tutankhamun's tomb. Again, Tutankhamun was obscure. He's only famous now because of his tomb. We did not really know who he was before that, but then they were able to take genetic testing, figure out that Tutankhamun and Akhenaten are related, or at least that one mummy in a tomb in the Valley of Kings is related to Tutankhamun, and all the evidence points to it being Akhenaten. However, a lot of people still say that that's not the case. Not a lot. Some. So, why? Why would someone do that? Why would they go through and absolve themselves of kingship, of godhood, absolve this rich history and mythology that guided people through their daily lives, creating a spiritual crisis? I mean, you got to think, if Osiris isn't real, okay, if there's no god of the afterlife, then who's judging us when we die? And if no one's judging us when we die, then why are we living the way we're living? And just everything. He entirely changed the landscape. He only did it for about 17 years, the duration of his rule. But he obviously, through the building of that other city, through the total desecration he committed on the other temples, he wanted this to be a forever change. He didn't want it to revert back. But, I mean, people don't like change. And if there's one thing that people really don't like, it's changing to their religion. I mean, your deepest core set of beliefs are not something that can just be flipped or reversed or this or that and just, oh, no big deal, we're over it. So why would he do that? I'm sure you are all waiting for it. I'm sure you are all hoping. I'll tell you why. And it takes me into the second idea behind all of these bonus episodes, where we talk about a little bit of the more far out things, I guess. And the answer to that is, of course, aliens. I am doing the motion with my hands, the Giorgio Tsoukalis motion, which I met him one time and it was phenomenal. Best day ever. I'm doing the motion. My hair's all crazy because I'm sick today. I couldn't even go to work, so my hair's all crazy because I didn't really shower and stuff. So just aliens. And I know that sounds crazy, and it is. I'm not going to say that it's not, but hear me out here, okay? Proponents of the ancient astronaut theory, which I hope we're all familiar with. If not, it just means that in ancient times, aliens came down, changed the course of human history, maybe left, maybe didn't, but that's the ancient astronaut theory in a nutshell. They have always had a field day with Egypt. The pyramids, I mean, it's one of the very first extraterrestrial references any of us get is as childs being told that aliens built the pyramids. You have also the Great Sphinx, and this is disturbingly true and untrue at the same time, or I guess I should say disturbingly true and unconfirmed at the same time, that there is a chamber, supposedly, under, I believe it's the left front foot of the Sphinx in Egypt, that is activated by pressing a button or a lever on the paw somewhere that will open up into this chamber that holds ancient wisdom. It holds scrolls from the Library of Alexandria. It holds the magical rites of the Egyptian priests and this and that have just been lost to the world. Again, weird, because according to what's the word? Radar imaging. According to radar imaging, there is some kind of hollow area down there. But the Egyptian government has never let anybody near it, has never let anybody looking for that button and getting into it. So that's a little weird, but that's a sidetrack. The main point is that ancient alien guys love ancient Egypt. And while Akhenaten is a relatively obscure figure in normal society, he is a pretty big deal in the ancient alien world. Now, it's been theorized that Akhenaten was actually the descendant of aliens, if not being an alien himself, as if somehow they switched out one of Amenhotep's, the third's, real children with an extraterrestrial double, or even just leaving him to be found, kind of like the story of Moses, except it's an alien instead of Moses. And there are a few different reasonings for this. The first is the obvious one, his bend towards monotheism. I said earlier that Akhenaten gave up his godhood, and again, true and untrue. He gave up his traditional godhood, but he did regard Aten as his true father. He called him this in his records. He has a poem of some sort, or a song for the Aten, song for the glory of the Aten, or something along those lines. And in these inscriptions and these records, he calls Aten his true father, and he says that there is only one God. His name is Aten. He is my father, and I can approach him whenever I please. Which I just want you to put on your alien colored glasses and just try to wish a little and believe a little, and just think about what that might mean. You know, the fact that this this God is his father, and that not like God the Father in traditional Judeo-Christian, but that he communes with his father face to face very often. Very strange. Very strange. You know, it's possible that Akhenaten, and again, possible, not super likely, he could have been descended from an extraterrestrial named Aten, and was attempting to bring the Egyptian people, and therefore, by association, all people of planet Earth, closer to a true understanding of the universe and its inhabitants. However, I don't know, man. It seems a little weird to me. But another curious point is the depiction of Aten himself, or itself. You know, the gods of Egypt were all very well-defined beings. Some of them looked like us, such as Amun. Some of them looked kind of like us, such as Osiris with his black-green skin. Others resembled hybrid creatures like Horus, Anubis, the man with the head of the jackal, but they have definite forms. The thing about Aten, though, is that Akhenaten never permitted Aten to be portrayed or to be shown as anything other than a round, glowing disc throwing light off that comes down to the earth in the form of rays that sometimes even end in human-like hands. Could it be... Well, let me try my ancient alien voice for this. Could it be that Aten, the ancient solar disk, wasn't a person or entity at all, but rather a flying saucer, as proponents of the ancient alien astronaut theory believe? And that's the question. I mean, that's really... It's very strange. Everything about Akhenaten and Atenism is very strange in the context of ancient Egyptian religion, but this is one of the out of the park things. They gave their gods images all the time. They wanted them to seem real. They wanted them to seem, kind of human, because they would be more real to the people. That way they'd have a greater sway. But Akhenaten refused for Aten to be portrayed as anything different than this weird kind of flying saucer type figure. Now, the last point about Akhenaten is his physical appearance, and it's probably the strongest one here. Of course, I am not a doctor. I don't claim to be a doctor. I'm sure that there are explanations for everything that has to do with the way Akhenaten looks, but if you haven't seen a picture of him yet, look him up. I mean, his head and his face is the very first thing. The ancient Egyptians were pretty good at depicting people, even if they were people with the heads of jackals and hawks and all of that. They could do it. And especially with their pharaohs, they like them to be broad-shouldered. They like them to look strong, look like they might have the power of a god sitting within them. Nice, strong chins. But with Akhenaten, his face is slender. His eyes are huge, and his head is elongated, and not elongated just due to they have their I forget the name, but it's basically the crown, and that crown can make it seem as though they're depicted as having elongated skulls. It's not just the crown, it's actual quote unquote images of him, or not images, but sculptures and likenesses of him without the crown that still show his head as being very large and being very elongated, just like we imagine that, combined with the slim face coming to a point at the chin, the big black eyes. I mean, that is your stereotypical extraterrestrial. The other thing is just his body in general. Again, they like broad shoulders, they like images of strength and vitality, and Akhenaten was shown as a lanky guy. A long and spindly dude with elongated arms. He had both a pot belly and, in some depictions, he actually had breasts and strangely proportioned legs and hips, to the point where it actually didn't seem like it was a depiction of a man at all, or even a depiction of a woman, but actually a joining of the two into some sort of, man and woman entity, male and female, masculine and feminine entity, all in one. And it's just weird. I would seriously Google or encourage you. I'm going to try to put some. Well, I think I can do show notes and Patreon. I haven't actually tried yet. If I can, I'm going to put some images of him in the show notes, but if not, just Google him. It's very strange. So, the Egyptians knew how to depict people. They left a wealth of artifacts attesting to this. So we're really left with two conclusions. Either one, they suddenly forgot how to depict people and, forgot how to do that, and then they relearned it immediately after he died. Or two, he actually looked like that. And again, I've read a lot of things about different health issues that he could have had, and it's known that Tutankhamun, his son, was not a very particularly strong child. He was a sickly dude as well. But even then, depictions of Tutankhamun look absolutely nothing like Akhenaten. So you just gotta say why. The last thing about him is this way back mythos. We're looking at 35,000 years ago. There's a record of a time called Zep Tepi, which was the period right after the primordial chaos that formed the universe settled, and the earth was there, but there really wasn't anything going on. And it was during this time that the gods came to earth and ruled the people there. Now, the ancient astronaut theorists contend that the gods did come to earth, the gods being extraterrestrials. Not only did they impose rule of law, but they also participated in a hybrid sort of breeding program. If we're looking at 40,000 years ago, that's pretty well before human civilization. That's before we had developed to the point of really using tools and this and that. We would have been simple people, if even relatively like the people we were here, or the people we are now today. But they contend that in addition to maybe helping out, maybe ruling a little, getting people to build stuff for them, they also contend that there might have been some sort of interaction that took place that took those 40,000-year-old ancestors of ours and altered them in some way to eventually become us. And if you look at accounts of Akhenaten's genealogy, he can trace his lineage back to the time when the gods ruled the earth, and he was the direct descendant of those gods. So that's Akhenaten. Pretty crazy. I love Egyptian history. I love everything about Egypt and the religion and the history and the everything about it. And so, like, thank you for putting up with me nerding out for 45 minutes. And if you also listened to the King Tut episode, thank you for listening to me nerd out for another probably hour and a half or so. But yeah, just a great story. I hope to be able to find more excuses to cover Egypt in the future, more weird events or anything like that. I can't think of any right now. So if you do know of anything, please let me know. I'd love an excuse to dig a little deeper here. But again, thank you. Thank you so much for supporting the show. We don't have a lot of bills associated with it, but we do have a little bit, just the stuff to host the website, which I don't even want to talk about the website. One day I'll redo it. I promise. It's probably not going to be anytime soon. But the bills to host the website, the bills to host the podcast itself and to create our RSS feed, as well as just the fact that a lot of times we can get our stuff, just our research materials, just from scouring and scouring and scouring. Sometimes we actually have to buy things. We have to buy books. We have to buy documentaries, stuff like that. So thank you for making this happen. Thank you for letting me achieve my dream of becoming a podcaster. Thank you for letting Jason achieve his dream of helping his friend become a podcaster, and thereby becoming one himself. And guys, we're just so grateful. Like I said, this is the first ever bonus episode. Hopefully there'll be a lot more to come. But until then, remember, whether in the dark of night, hidden underneath the massive dunes in the Egyptian desert, or it's tonight, and as you try to fall asleep, the image of a fearsome jackal-headed god sits by your bed. We are not alone.
10 minutes of goodness.
Well, okay, now we're live.
Now we're live?
That's how that started.
All right, well.
Welcome to the first ever 15-minute, 10-minute, whatever debrief of the Not Alone podcast. You know who we are. I'm not going
to... Welcome back.
Welcome back.
So, go for it, Sam.
Yeah,
what you got?
If you do, well, and just so everybody knows, if you do subscribe to the $5 tier as well, I'm just not going to edit this out. I'm just going to make this part of the master recording. So if you want to listen to this right after the end of the show, it'll just automatically play. But if not, hello. If you're just on the $1 tier, hello. And I think, first off, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Seriously.
And welcome back.
I seriously don't think that anybody's going to hear this for at least 6 months.
Oh, that's totally fine.
And that's okay. I'm fine with that. But yeah, cool. Anyway,
so what part of the curses really freaked you out the most?
Really, it was. I'm gonna see if I can lean back and move that closer to my face. There we go.
Let's try.
Why was I doing this the whole time?
I don't know, but it's a brilliant idea.
You're gonna fall backwards, and that's
no, I'm not. I'm gonna be fine.
Mike's gonna kill you. Oh wow! I just laughed so hard that I gave myself side stitches. Ooh, that's not good. Oh god, it's the curse. Really the freakiest the freakiest part of the curse for me is what we covered at the end of the episode.
Yeah, those last couple.
Yeah, I mean, It is. And I just don't see, I mean, you're your own person. You can live your own life. I just don't see, I specifically put those in there because to me they were too much to be coincidence. Like they were just too much to be, oh, like this habit. So I just don't see how you have that within you unless you just really don't believe in anything, which countermands our motto, which is just believe a little. This whole episode to me felt a lot more like a debate than even the Chupacabra episode.
I mean, so there's a lot of influence of what can happen to us, and I'm not ruling out that might not be a curse. What I'm saying is simply the fact that, I mean, that also took place in the 70s, which is 40 years ago from now.
Right.
I mean, that's a long time.
It is.
I mean, I get stories mixed up from a week ago.
Mm-hmm.
And also,
what are you doing with your microphone?
I'm trying to...
It's on a mic stand for a reason. You don't have to hold it. But I mean, you can do whatever you want.
Anyway, there's a lot of different things that can cause heart attacks. There's a lot of different things that can go wrong. It doesn't necessarily
but going wrong
mean that it's a curse.
Going wrong, the really big thing. So Dr. Ibrahim, that was big for me. That was the first moment when I was like, "Oh God, this might be
a thing,
something more." But then the story of that flight engineer, the heart attack,
that
every year at the same minute.
See, how
does that happen?
How many sources do you have of that being factual?
I have the main source, that book, which it is well researched. It does have like a bibliography and things. And then I Googled it as well. I found one other thing.
Okay.
So to me, if I only find something from one source, it's probably not going in the show.
Okay.
Because I agree
with that.
As a history dropout, I know that you have to have, especially for secondary sources, you have to have
a little bit more backup. Yeah. All right. Well, I mean, I just think it's also incredibly weird for a curse to strike that far later and be as horrendous, because that is horrendous. And the deaths that we went over and covered, for most of them, were pretty run-of-the-mill style deaths, while that one is intense, and to someone that didn't really have it coming out for him.
He didn't seem to have done anything wrong to offend it. But that's the thing, that thing about the time, what you just said, how much longer it was. I thought of that at first as well. And I started, the further I got away from 1923, I was like, oh, well, this isn't the curse because it's, 10 years, 20 years, 30, 40 years later. And then, that woman who died was just, I think it was after 2010 when she went to visit the tomb.
Was it? I remember I rewatched that in actually a National Geographic documentary.
Oh, cool.
Which I think came out in, I want to say, the late 90s. I remember watching it as a kid.
Interesting.
And then I went back to go rewatch it.
I may have found something different then.
Oh,
because I was pretty sure it was maybe not 2010.
If you have a weakened immune system, do not go to King Tut's tomb.
Just don't go
and
anywhere.
Touch the paint and pull off the mold and inhale it. Do not do that.
Is that what she did?
Yes.
Lord.
She was apparently an art major. And from my understanding, her art professor told her that if you ever go, you must touch the paint.
That guy should be sued for manslaughter.
I mean,
that's ridiculous.
Secondary or something. But first off, as kind of like a fellow art student, why would you touch that?
You don't have to.
I would be terrified of ruining it.
Yeah.
Let alone.
Yeah, screw this.
Let alone feeling the texture. I can see with my eyes the texture of the wall.
Although,
I don't need to physically touch it.
You're talking to a guy who, whenever there's a do not touch sign.
Oh, of course you're going to touch it.
Yeah. And one of my biggest, I have a lot of regrets in my life. I lived my life.
What was the one thing you didn't touch?
I lived my life. Wow, it's like you know me. I lived my life in a pretty crummy way for the first 19 years of it.
Quarter mile at a time.
I'm still not.
Some people will get that.
I'm still not a great person, but I'm trying. And I regret many things about how I treated people and things I've done in my life. But one thing that I regret almost more than all of that is going to see the Liberty Bell and not touching it.
All right. I think I want to say I saw Liberty Bell. Maybe I didn't. That's in Pennsylvania, right?
Yeah.
No, I don't think I did. I saw it though in National Treasure, so I mean that's kind of the same thing.
That's
right?
true. It is. Yeah, you're basically there. That movie is so engrossing.
If you're not able to touch
it's like
it's
you're
pretty much the
transported
same
to
thing.
wherever Nick Cage is. He's such a phenomenal actor.
All right, Sam, you just lost all your credibility for our listeners.
Okay. The other thing that's weird about this is because a lot of people who know me know that I have my own religious beliefs, know that I am a Christian and I follow that doctrine and belief system. And so this whole episode was weird to me, not because it affected those beliefs in any way, but it was hard to reconcile, like, in that mindset, the typical Christian mindset, it's that, like, these gods obviously did not exist. Like, there is no Anubis, there is no Horus, there is no Ra. The Pharaoh was just a man. Curses aren't a thing. Ghosts aren't a thing. And it was hard for me to sit back and get accustomed to the idea, especially of Carter's death, with Anubis sitting on his chest. It was hard for me to give that any sort of credibility, but I just had to suspend my disbelief, basically. I just had to say, this is how it is. And you've got to, as a historian, not that I am one, hopefully I will be one day, but as a historian, you have to sit back and take that approach of cultural relativism, wherein just because I believe this thing doesn't mean that other cultures are supposed to believe it or have to believe it as well.
I think polytheism made a lot of sense back then.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, because stuff just happens.
Yeah.
And I mean, good and bad, and you can associate those things with several different gods trying to play an impact onto your life, and that makes a lot of sense for them. And that's why, I mean, they lived on the Nile. They lived in an incredibly harsh environment. That the whims of the gods was a big deal.
Yeah.
That makes a ton of sense.
Yeah, it's... Well, and, you know, like, so often people sit back and they talk about the ancient people as if they were stupid, as if they were savages. And
no, they were us, just with less technology.
Right, exactly. But what they lacked in technology, they substituted in...
Ingenuity
and creativity. That's why, first off, like, even on a technological level, like, look at the pyramids. The aliens did it. They didn't do it, though. Oh my gosh. And that, to me, that's a big sign of disrespect. Anytime that we look and say, oh, the aliens did it, we're forgetting all of the slave labor that went into it and the people who lost their lives building the pyramids. But the fact is that the
engineering required to do
they were
something
able
like
to do
that
it.
Is insane.
But even beyond that, think about the mythos, especially of ancient Egypt, one of the most complicated hierarchies of gods and demons and all of this. Like, these people created that. And sure, they may have created it because one day the sun was really bright and they didn't know where it went at night and all that. But their ignorance shouldn't be mistaken for stupidity, because I would posit that these...
No, they're incredibly smart. They actually knew that the Earth was round.
Yeah,
they had an idea of exactly how long it was.
Yeah, they totally did.
Earth's circumference was.
But think of the last time you heard a story as complex and deep and real and just how it accounts for everything as the ancient mythologies of Egypt and Rome and the people of Central America, like, and the Native Americans and the Aboriginals.
Right, it was...
These people, we've lost that in a way. I would say that as a species, while we can still write great novels, we've lost our ability to create something that can be believed in that we can't see. Like, can't see and touch with our hands. If we can see it and if we can touch it, we can believe in it. But really, anything new, apart from the conspiracy theorists, like, we don't have that ability anymore to create something out of nothing and to believe in it with all of our heart, you know?
Well, nothing is an original thought anymore. Mm-hmm. I mean, all creativity that we have has been influenced in some way or another from something else.
Which is a good thing in its own way.
Oh yeah, it's absolutely fine. But I think the idea of being able to create something completely out of thin air isn't
It just
possible.
can't happen. Yeah.
We rely on too much of our experiences and the other influences that impact us whenever we want to tell a story or whenever we want to create anything new. And it's not 100% fabricated from your mind. It's not 100% new. You're drawing from your other resources.
Can I interrupt you for a
Egyptians
second?
were smart people. Go for it. I lost my train of thought anyway.
A lot of people have deja vu. I also have deja vu. Everybody has it sometimes.
Dude, all the time. It's annoying. It's like, whoa. Stop talking about this.
It's fantastic. I love it. Whenever it happens, it freaks me out, but I'm like, oh my God, this is amazing. I have a slightly different thing that happens to me as well as deja vu, and it's like deja vu, except it didn't happen to me, and it just happened. Essentially, what it is, it happened right now, it happened last week, it happens every so often, where I'll be doing something, like last week we were watching the Beverly Hills Dog Show on TV, and I got this feeling, not that I had done it before, but rather that it had been done before. And I envisioned billions and trillions of light years away in another galaxy. There's probably two dudes sitting with microphones in front of their mouth talking about the culture of an ancient people and a curse that's associated with it. And it's like a cosmic deja vu. And that's what I'm experiencing right now.
You gotta lay off the drugs, bro.
Right? I don't do any drugs anymore. But I can see it in my mind. And maybe it's just because I can see you right now. But I love it. It's a dope feeling.
Okay.
It's super cool. Everybody think that way. Next time you're doing something, just imagine other beings doing the exact same thing, but we're separated by more space than we can even fathom. The universe is that big. It's big enough for this to be happening twice. And I believe that it has. So that's my metaphysical spiel. Because it's the last 15-minute debrief. We don't have to talk about anything we don't want to, and we can talk about whatever we want.
How about this? Who's your favorite Egyptian god?
My favorite Egyptian god would be Bantu.
That's
normal people aren't going to get that. That's a reference to Magic the Gathering. My favorite Egyptian god would probably have to be Anubis, because he's
so cool.
He is so cool.
So cool. And I can always pronounce his name.
We've got an interview in a few weeks with an amazing researcher. We're going to keep that under wraps for now, just in case anything falls through. It shouldn't, though. And in her research, she's actually found cases of people, not even people who care about ancient Egypt at all, but they'll be lying in their beds, they'll wake up, and they'll see figures like Anubis just standing in their room.
I talked about this on Hi Brazil, didn't I? About abductions and...
Well, but it's not an abduction.
Yeah, but it's the same thing about... in Japan, it was a really big thing. Yeah, sleep paralysis and hallucinations. At the foot at your bed.
Right.
It's very common.
Right. But still, that's so freaky.
Like,
that's so
weird. In
I can't tell
Japan, it's usually like it's constantly like an old lady at the foot of your bed at all times. It's like and I think it just has to go subconsciously that way, because once someone talks about it and they're like, oh man, that's crazy. And then you experience it, holy cow, it has to be real. I mean, same thing.
Yeah.
Same thing. If I say I watched an Egyptian documentary and then 3 days later I had a dream about it, then those coincide.
Well, it goes back to the idea that nothing's original anyway. So if all great art and creativity comes from your mind, and
that
your
when
mind
you
is
dream,
nothing. God, I'm trying to. All right.
Did you know real quick though? When you dream, people that you see in your dream, those are actual faces that you've seen in real life. Your mind cannot create a new face.
That's interesting. Did you know that when I dream, I usually don't see anybody else? It's all just...
It's just you floating around doing things?
No, it's not that I'm floating around doing things, but my dreams don't really have a lot of other people in them.
Okay.
They're pretty much just me doing things.
Gotcha.
Like, there was this one terrible dream I had. I was on vacation. and I'm going to cry just thinking about it. I missed my dog Baron so much, and I had a dream that he went crazy and attacked me, and I ended up hurting him. And then after I hurt him, he went back to being my sweet little guy. And I woke up and it wrecked me for like a day and a half. I had to FaceTime with my father-in-law who was taking care of him. I had to FaceTime with him just so I could see Baron and tell him that I love him and that I'll never hurt him. I'm a very susceptible person.
You are.
Anyway, well, all right. Who's your Egyptian god?
Oh, dude, Anubis. Yeah.
Anubis, yeah.
110%. Followed by Horus, probably.
Yep. Or Ra, by the power of Ra.
Just because of Yu-Gi-Oh!
We should, right. We should probably, I would think, sit down and do a film review. What we should do is we should do a live commentary, not a live commentary, but you and I should sit down and watch The Prince of Egypt, the best movie ever made.
You just want to watch The Prince of Egypt again.
I love it so much. The last time I watched it, I sobbed for like 20 minutes.
I'm over it.
I love it. Anyway, all right. There it is, our first ever debrief. So again,
Ooh, you made it through it, maybe.
I don't blame you if you turned it off. Again, thanks for your support. There's also a secret reward tier that I forgot to mention. If you pledge $100 or more,
what the heck?
I will make you a calendar of Jason dressed provocatively and send it to you. So
you don't want that. You don't want that.
Well, some people might want that. No one wants it of me.
Do you even have a camera like to shoot that for?
I have the iPhone 7.
Ooh. Well, I got the 7 Plus, so you know.
Portrait mode.
Let's get portrait mode on my body.
Of our skeezy photos. All right, guys.
Horrible.
We're done. We're out. We'll see you next week with, I think, Whitley Street. I think Communion might end up being a 2-parter, but we'll just see how it goes. So we'll see you with either
play by ear.
all of Communion or part 1 of Communion. Cool. Thank you so much, and we're not alone.
Good night.
Believe a little.